Okay, we will ask our clerk to call the roll of the board, please.
Present. Here.
Here.
Here. Present.
Thank you for that. All members of the board is present. Get a little bit of background here as we get started, and we'll allow anyone that wants to come up and speak to do so at the podium. Every taxing jurisdiction in Georgia is required to publicize in the local paper a 5-year digest history of the previous 5 years, the current year of the tax digest. I want to call your attention to that. It is broken up into two main sections. You have the unincorporated and the incorporated. The unincorporated areas are going to be areas outside your city limits. Your incorporated is going to be a combination of all of the properties inside all of the cities within Walker County. And so when you look toward the bottom of the page, you'll see right there under total counties, it says total county value. If you look at 2018, it was $1,298,000 and change was the total value of properties that the assessor's office had come up with as their grand total of value. And you'll see as you go through the years, when you get over into 2021, that number moved to $1,499,000. And in 22, it was a $1,822,000. And in 2023, this year, it's $2,279,000. So there's several things that's driving that number. Some of that is based off of, comparable sales in the market, the inflation, the cost of homes, but also over the last several years, we've been adding about 125 to 150 new homes in our county. And so you have also the growth of the county is in that number. So I put a couple of spreadsheets together with a couple of bar graphs, and those spreadsheets are there on the back table. But just wanted to be able to illustrate, and on this sheet, I even went back to 2017, and at that time, the digest value was $1,287,000. So from 2017 to 2023, our assessed value of our digest has increased by $991,000. It's almost increased almost $1 billion, or 77% over these last 7 years. We have gone from $1.2 billion to almost $2.3 billion, an increase of almost $992 million, or 77% growth in the digest. And so if you go back and look at the 5-year history notice, the next line down shows you the total county taxes levied. In 2018, it was $14,175,000. It's been plus or minus $14 million over the last several years. This year, it is $14,092,068. So there's a second graph I put together because I had to do them separate because the numbers were just so different. And also went with it back to 2017. And the dollars of increase that we have collected as a county government, and also with the projection of 2023, over 7 years, when you add it all together, it's an increase of $125,414 total. So when you go back to your 5-year history, that's where you see I got those numbers. And this year, we're proposing the digest to increase $10,537 for this year. The state law says that if we take in $1 more of tax than we did the prior year, we have to advertise a tax increase. It don't matter that we added 150 new homes. It doesn't matter that sales values have gone up. It matters if you take in $1 more of tax than you did the prior year, you have to advertise a tax increase. So we worked real hard to try to get that number to zero, but when you're dealing with billions of dollars of value and you're dealing with a millage rate and a complicated formula, $10,537 was as close as I could get to zero without going negative. I know that sounds crazy. You would think you could get closer than that. You would think you could get within $100, but myself and our CFO hadn't been able to figure out how to do that if it's possible. So our goal was, as we have trended, is to try to keep our property taxes as level as we can, because we have been very successful in this community with our community supporting other types of revenue such as T-Splosh and Splosh. And so those have allowed us to take the pressure off of these property taxes. Because when we have those sales tax dollars coming in, those Splosh dollars coming in, we can use those on capital projects. We can buy heavy equipment to work on our roads. We can buy fire trucks and police cars and computers and all of those real expensive capital projects. We use those dollars to take pressure off the general fund. We were one of the early adopters of T-Splosh that we had for 5 years. So we went for over 5 years that we didn't have to take money out of the general fund to pave our roads. And we paved about 120 miles of roads without having to use money out of the general fund. We are paving 38 miles of roads this year, and we're using the remaining of the T-Splosh dollars we had, plus the $6 million of Splosh money we had allocated to pave roads. And so that's part of the way we've been able to do this, plus some of our other revenue sources have been up. And so, you know, our desire has been to take as much pressure off property taxes as we possibly can. So I'm glad that we have this 5-year history. I think it's good to look at the trends, look at where we've come from, look at what's being proposed, and the additional spreadsheets I hope are helpful as well. So at this time, I'll ask if there's any board member that would like to add anything to that before we open up for the citizens to speak. Okay, here now. We do ask if you would like to speak. This is only about the tax levy, the property taxes. We're going to get into, after 7 o'clock, we'll have the hearing about the alcohol ordinance and everything else on that agenda. So this is just about property taxes only. That's the only thing we can hear at this time. So if you do like to speak, we will need you to come to the podium and just state your name for the record. And we need you at the podium so Joe can pick you up on the camera, and he's got a microphone so that everybody watching at home or goes back and watches this recording on Facebook can hear what you have to say. So is anyone that'd like to come forward to talk about the millage rate? Yes, sir. Please come forward.
Looking at the
please state your name if you
Gary Williams.
Thank you, sir.
Looking at the taxes levied there for the unincorporated, last year was $8,800,000. This year it's $9,500,000. If you take the difference, that's an increase from last year of about $706,000. That is for the unincorporated. If you look at down at the incorporated, there was a last year tax levied. I'm trying to find it here on this small print. I think it was let's see, where's it at? No, it was $5,200,000 levied last year. This year it's $4,500,000. So that's a decrease in the incorporated, which I understand is the cities. So that's an increase in the unincorporated of $700,000 and a decrease or minus of a $695,000 for the cities. Why is that?
There's a couple of things that drive that, and it's very frustrating for us, the guidelines we have to follow. So if you'll notice there, in both of those, your gross millage rate has to be the same for both. So that's part of your starting basis. And so you see that it went from 12.6013 mils down to 9.853. And then when it talks about the less the millage rate rollback, that you're rolling back the sales tax, and you also roll those back equal, but that number is different every single year in that rollback amount. And then we have the rollback for the unincorporated area, because it's a greater number, is the insurance tax premium credit. So we only receive that for the unincorporated area. The cities receive it within the city to be able to roll taxes back within the city. So those numbers change every year. So if you look at the incorporated area in the 2022, those taxes, were levied, and let's see, let me find my bearings here. So you see, it actually was more it went up last year in the incorporated to $611,868,000, where the prior year it was $506,000. So the incorporated went up last year. So, and it's a very complicated.
It decreased this year.
Yeah, because the insurance tax credit was the variable. Because your gross is the same, your sales tax is the same. The other variable is the insurance tax credit.
That's $695. Okay.
So what the state looks like, we have to add those together, and we get to the bottom. If it equals $1 more, then we have to advertise it with increased taxes.
Okay. Now, we had an increase of our fire fee a few months ago of 40%. And the fire chief done a great presentation, but he said that would be equal to about 4.3 mills. So if you add that on, because the unincorporated, all the rural country folk, other than Chickamauga, they pay into it. So that'd really be a total increase for the unincorporated of about 10.035 mills. Would that be correct?
I mean, I follow your logic, but I don't remember the number that he used.
I think it was like 4.3 and went out to about 5 or 6 decimal places.
Yeah.
But it's 4.3 mills, so that'd be a total of 10 mills increase for the unincorporated.
But as you can see,
that's a lot.
we've had inflation every year.
For everybody.
For everybody on all things that all of us buy. And most other taxing districts in this region, whether it be other cities, counties, school systems, whatever, I have yet to find one that has really been able to somewhat flatline their revenue over the last 7 years.
Would the board consider, and this is just something to look at, consider the public safety fee to be included into the tax instead of a fire fee under a special tax district? Look at that and see if that would help out the citizens, mainly the senior citizens maybe, if you combine that and not had the fire fee.
Yeah,
Could y'all look at that? Would y'all be willing to look at that?
Sure.
Yeah, that's a great question.
And see if that would be a good thing for us,
And Chief Hodge has done that a couple of times, and I think he did so before this last change. So we could get him to provide you that information to look at, because he looked at that option to see if it was more favorable, and it did not prove to be, but we can get you that information and share that.
I just know that on a tax, you have the exemptions. And on a fire fee,
Right.
public safety fee, what are you gonna call it, there's no exemptions. Everybody that in unincorporated and pays for that.
That's
So,
right.
might be some help to some senior citizens or something. But that's something I just would like for you guys to look at. And then my last thing is, I've yet to see a budget posted so that we could look at it, make comments, have questions.
It's not been completed, that's forthcoming, so that is coming, but that's not complete.
But I thought you had to have the budget and divide that by the tax digest to get the millage rate. So you'd have to already have to have the budget.
Well, that's one way to approach it, but what we're doing, we're less and less dependent on our property taxes for our budget, because our total budget, if I remember correctly, is around $35 to $40 million. So less than half of the money generated to fund the general fund budget comes from the property taxes. So it's becoming a less and less of pressure on the property taxes to fund the general fund budget, because it's more than double what this revenue is.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Jerry.
Good question. Anyone else that'd like to speak in regard, is this on the millage rate? Okay, Mr. Pope, come on up, sir.
I'm Jim Pope.
Shannon, I got a question for you. How are y'all going to determine the millage rate when you don't know the total value of the county property?
Well, we do know the total value. The assessor's office completed that and sent out those notices to everyone in May. So all 34,000 parcels in the county, they did those calculations and determined the values then. And that's where this number is on here, in the bottom right-hand side, fourth line up, the $2,279,000 in change. That's the total assessed value of all the properties in the county.
But the problem is that there's appeals out there, and it may get changed. So if it goes down, how are you going to determine the millage rate?
Terry, would you want to speak to that, or do you have, when we have these appeals and things, there's still some that have not been finalized that when this was published? Do you mind coming up so everybody can hear you at home? This is Terry Gilreath. He's our chief assessor for Walker County, so he lives this every day.
Yeah. As of right now, we've really worked through most of the appeals. We had 1,136, I believe it was.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Amount to. That includes personal property too. So we've went through them. There's very little changes that we can do. There are some that we did make changes to, but the biggest thing that people were appealing was their taxes. That notice of assessment that comes out every year gives you an estimate based off the previous year's millage rate, which is really an ignorant way of doing something. It's just it's a fictitious number that is not your taxes. Your taxes aren't determined until they set the millage rate, whether it be the governing authority here or the school board. So most of them we talk to, once we get to talk to them, they're like, oh, well, I'm fine with my value. I'd sell it for a whole lot more than that. So we're knocking them off quite a bit like that. If there is any adjustment, it's going to be minor. So.
But to point out too, and you said it's a silly way to send them out, but the state mandates that we send them out to a certain date based on last year's millage.
Yeah, that was something that some of the legislators come up with back in 2012 or 2011, and then applied it 2012, and we started sending those out to everybody like that. But it's been a false number ever since it started.
Right.
And it causes a lot of heartache with the property owners. So once everything's adjusted out, the property owners are usually good. So, but we have to send it out like that. But we have been talking to our legislators, trying to get that done away with. But the only thing you should see when that notice comes out is the value. That's it. That's all that we worry about. That's the only thing that we're going to talk to you about. The taxes mean nothing to us. It's just that value, what you'd sell your property for. And really, 9 times out of 10, people that we talk to, they're like, I'm fine. I'm fine with the value. Or it would have been a whole lot more appeals than that. So, but we'll work with you and try to help you understand all of that when the time comes. We're more than happy to do that. So, but if we can get that thing off of there and get everybody focused on their values, I think it would really stop a lot of this heartache. Because that's a big adjustment. What y'all are lowering that to, that's making a huge difference. It's going to make a huge difference.
Thank you. One additional thing too that I failed to mention a while ago, the state legislation and our governor signed a bill last year that added an additional $18,000 homestead exemption if you have homestead on your personal residence. So currently and historically for several years, the homestead exemption in Walker County has been $2,000 off of your value. The state is adding and reducing another $18,000. So when you get your final tax bill, if you have homestead, that's going to lower your tax bill because the state's going to fund that difference and send that to all the local governments, the difference of that savings, because the state has additional funds and they want to return it back to the property homeowners in all the state.
For this year.
Just for this year, yeah, good point. It's just for this year only, so we don't know what they may do in years to come.
One more question. Do you have an estimate or a prediction about what you think the tax is going to do to the people? Is it going, what percentage do you think it would raise by, decrease by, or anything? Do you have any feeling along that? Do you think it's going to stay pretty close to same like on this chart here through the years? It stayed pretty same.
Well, we can only look at, predicting or budgeting for 1 year at a time. We look back and see the last 6 years we've been able to stay flat. We don't know exactly what the collections will be. We don't know exactly what the final appeals will be. But this $14 million, round number plus or minus, should be very close, which would be pretty flat. And again, keep in mind the growth in values of homes and businesses, and also the addition, of about 150 new homes just in the unincorporated area every year. And that doesn't include what the cities have built in their jurisdictions. But so there's been more properties values added because of new construction.
You don't think there'll be a real sharp increase then?
No, it's estimated basically we're going to collect $10,000 more round numbers.
Okay.
Total. Over 34,000 parcels, and I think that was what?
$3.22 per, on average. Yes, Terry, is that?
Correct that. It's not just the real property, it also includes manufactured housing, personal property, and all those accounts, that's what we call them. Total accounts that come up to 40,000. Hold on, that's it right here. It's 40,934 total accounts that will be applied to, which shakes out to about a 26-cent increase per account.
So about
Thank you.
26 pennies per every bill on an average.
But we only set the county millage rate. We have nothing to do with the school board or any of those.
Yeah, great point. I failed to cover that. This body here only addresses the county M&O, maintenance and operation tax.
I hope you're right.
Yeah,
Now,
so.
the $18,000 is our understanding that it's supposed to apply to the cities too. If they have a homestead exemption, it goes against their part of their millage.
So we don't set the millage rate for any of the cities, and we don't set the millage rate for any of the school systems. This is only your county government operations. Now, when you get your bill, your school, if you live in the unincorporated, if you're outside of, say, Chickamauga, actually, if you're outside of Chickamauga, your school tax and your county tax will be on one bill. And that's to have, efficiencies, the way it's been set up across the state. But we don't control those numbers. Anyone else come up and speak about the millage? Okay, come on up, sir.
I'm Ed Fleener. Been a while since I've been able to get back and attend. First time to attend with all the board. Appreciate everything that's been going on. And you, Shannon, since you come into office, we've seen a lot of good things happen in this county. One thing's bothered me even back on the past administration was we got all this county property laying dormant, per se. Like the Aldi plant there, where all that property is for years and years and years, and there's nothing going on. How can we look at all this and assess this, get it back into the tax digest? Because that property's been laying there, since Aldi built, there's nothing. And, other land that we've assessed over the years, how can we really get back there? And I appreciate, hey, we're doing great. I'm glad to see so many more participating in these meetings than before.
Yeah.
And, but we appreciate what's going on in this county now. But that was one of the prospects I was just concerned.
That's a great question about economic development, because we do have the industrial park in north of side of Lafayette there, and also up in Rock Springs. There was one of the parcels in Rock Springs, a 5-acre tract that was sold and closed last week. I wasn't able to talk about it until the closing was done, but there's a company coming in there that's does light industrial. It's going to create about 30 to 40 new jobs over the next couple of years. And we have 14 other companies that we're in conversations with about locating in the Lafayette Industrial Park. So we hoped if we could get even a couple of those would be great, but there's at least that much activity of active engagement with our economic development part
It'd be good to
currently.
see that land, instead of growing up, being used.
Right.
Okay,
Thank you. Appreciate your positive comments. Anyone else want to speak on the notice for the tax assessment before we get over into our other business? Yes, sir. Please come forward.
Hi, my name is Chris. I'm a resident of Chickamauga and want to thank you for the opportunity, and it's great to see the community get involved. Can you educate me on how we get to the assessed value and why that's done every year? And not necessarily how you get to the value, but why do we assess it every year? If I don't sell my home, I get no benefit from that increased value. I think it impacts everybody in this room that my taxes went up 2.5 times over the last 3 years. But I've got no benefit from that financially, and with everything else going on, as we know in the economy, it's harder for people to pay those bills, and then we get this tax bill. It's like, well, I've got no benefit, but all my expenses keep going up. So is it school board fees or is it millage fee? I don't understand how to calculate millage. I apologize. Maybe that's obvious to people in the room, but I just don't know how to get that. Can you explain that to us?
Probably would like our chief assessor to come back up and talk about the assessment process and why the state regulations that y'all have to follow, because it's all driven by state regulations.
So that's state, not county?
Yeah, this
Okay.
body doesn't get to make those rules, unfortunately, because I'm sure we would change them.
Yeah, because the frequency is done by the
Yeah,
state.
it's kind of a rough system.
We are mandated by state law to maintain our values at a certain level. So like, when you're taxed at 40% of the fair market value, that's what these values reflect. Okay, so when a property sells, they measure us against that. Are you at 40% like that's supposed to be? Well, what's been happening is our values over several years have went up, so that means our percentage at 40% has went down. But we have to be within 36 to 44% on that when the sales happen. Unfortunately, we got down to in the 20s because a lot was happening, a whole lot was happening. So we have to bring those up to meet those state requirements. If we don't, the counties can be fined. Okay, so we're making an effort. We're bringing it up, and they're doing their part by lowering the millage rate to cushion that. But you don't have to do anything to your property. It's what has sold. And we've had literally thousands per year that have sold for astronomical amounts of money. So it winds up affecting everybody. Now, we're hoping this coming year, we hope it'll all level off a little bit. You know, I would like, instead of doing the 15 and 25 and the 30%, I'd like to get us to a point where we're doing 3 or 7%. That's a little bit softer, I think, and that's commonly what's happened throughout the state in the past. So I'd like to get us to that point. As far as sales, deed transactions is what we go by. We are still on course to have over 3,000 deed transactions this year. I know you're probably seeing stuff on the news that, oh, it's dropping. Well, it's true to a certain extent in the volume. Okay, instead of 5,000 like we've had in the past, now we've got 3,000 deed transactions. Years ago, we'd had 1,200 deed transactions a year. So, but the market's still pretty much hot, and the problem being that there is a demand There's such a demand for housing. Last October, we had a gentleman speak to us at one of our GAAO conferences, and he pointed out that in the state of Georgia, back in October, there was a demand for 93,000 new homes, but there was only 16,000 permits that were issued throughout the state of Georgia. So when that happens, that's one of the driving forces behind the values going up. One of Carolyn's friends put their house on the market. Next day, there's 3 people in their yard bidding on that property. There's such a demand for these properties. But the problem with that is if you get ready to sell your house, you better have a place to go because somebody's going to buy it. So, but right now, that's what we're working with and dealing with. It's because of state law. Now, I know you may think the fine, the $5 per parcel thing might be minor, but it adds up. It's not just that. If you still don't have your stuff in order, they can take away the grants that the county's receiving. And even further than that, if it got so bad, the state can take away the charter of the county. And the state comes in and runs things. And it doesn't matter what you think, it's going to be what they put it at. So we don't ever want to get that bad. And our ratio studies have come out from the state this week. I don't know if you get the opportunity to see that. We brought ours up to 38.09, which is really good. I'm proud of what we've done there. And hopefully we can maintain that and keep that up there. And it keeps us safe, and it also affects some other things too with certain revenues. But some of the other counties, there's a lot of counties that are out of range, so they couldn't bring theirs up. And you know, that's a dangerous thing to step out in when you don't do what you're supposed to do there. And they do some of it, they try to soften the blow, and that's what we did start out with. But it got so overwhelming that we had to increase like we've done. It's 30% this past year. Now, my initial numbers that I've been looking at, it's encouraging to me. It's kind of looking like we might be leveling off, but we still have a few months to go. And there's still that demand there. And the only thing that may be helping will be that they've raised the interest rates. There's some drop off there that we think that may be happening there. But you know, we actually were caught up on our deed process at the first of the year, and we thought, man, this thing's really dug in, and maybe we can level this thing off. And then all of a sudden, we got hit hard. We've got stacks of deeds that have come through, and we've got there's 6 of us working on them, trying to process them as fast as we can.
So when Terry talks about deeds coming in, that's where somebody has sold a property in this county, and that has to be recorded, and y'all have to evaluate that and update that into the system. So that's what's driving this whole process, is those transactions of those deed sales.
Right. The property values are dictated really by the property owners, what they bought or sold these properties for. Hey, and I don't blame any of them. You know, I would want to get the most money out of the property that I could, and that's what's happening. They're getting astronomical money for some of these properties. And you know, in the past we called those extreme outliers, and at that point we were able to kick those out because you only had 1 or 2. Now we have thousands, and unfortunately that becomes the market. And we have to include those in. We can't ignore that now. So the values, they're constantly going to change. We're going to try to stay on top of them to where when we do have to make those adjustments, hopefully they can be cushioned a little bit. They're not be so hard on everybody.
Thank you for that.
Does that make any sense?
Yeah,
You're
thank
welcome
you.
to come by the
Yeah,
office and
I'll
sit
be
down
happy
with
to.
us.
Thank you. Are you petitioning on behalf of the community to the state to change that process, or is that something we have to do, or?
Our Association of County Commissioners is working on that issue, especially the reporting of having to report the prior year's millage rate, and also the process is way too complex, and it doesn't allow you to really account fairly for the growth of new homes and things. And so there's active, but anytime residents like yourself can reach out to your local delegation, or House members or senators and so forth at the state level, that also helps as well.
Okay, all right, thank you, appreciate it.
Chris, are you speaking of the process that we send the assessments out? Are you speaking of
The annual appraisal value,
Yeah, he's speaking of
yeah,
reassessing it.
which is, that's different, right?
Yeah, the
That's a
whole
state
system
mandate.
needs to be overhauled.
Yeah,
In my opinion.
Yeah, just other states do it to where it's when I buy the house, or say I do an improvement in excess of 200 square feet, or, some improvement to the property, then it gets reevaluated. So that's what I was trying to understand, is that a state requirement, or is that a county requirement?
State.
Okay, all right,
It's all
thank you.
state driven, so everything's uniform across the state.
Got it, all right.
Thanks.
Anyone else wants to speak on the tax digest? Yes, sir. Please state your name.
Yes, Robbie Tate. How many full-time tax assessors do we employ in Washington County right now?
There's 18 of us.
18. And what are these 18 people doing on a daily basis? What is their, you said there's 6 of you working on catching up on these deeds that have been filed. Where are these other 12 people? What is their role?
Well, you've got different departments. You've got the deeds department. You've got our administrative department, which includes me. And then we've got the appraisal staff, which actually goes out to the properties and handles that end of it. And personal property department.
Okay. And so we all know that during COVID, a lot of people fled these very liberal states and they moved to more conservative states. And they're buying up property sight unseen. They're buying houses that they've never visited, and they're paying 2 and 3 times what the real value of that property is. So if I interpret what you said correctly, all of that factors in to what my house is valued at. Is that correct?
Yes.
So that's an anomaly that should level out, right? I mean, because that's out of the ordinary. Okay, at some point that should slow down, but how do we go back and readjust our property values to the real value? I paid $2,760 in property tax last year. I have a fixed rate mortgage. I paid my mortgage at the first of this month. It was $1,265, and that includes the escrow. But I looked online, and my payment for next month is going to go up $125. I have a fixed rate mortgage. Okay, that has to be the escrow. My insurance certainly didn't go up that much, and at $125 a month, that's over $1,400 more next year that they're anticipating I'm going to have to pay in property tax. So you're looking at $4,000 in property.
We're hearing that same thing from several people, and the escrow company should not be suggesting people like that, because the taxes haven't been.
They're not due till December, right?
Right, they're doing that to people left and right.
Right.
And now they should.
So does the property tax office send something to our escrow company or our mortgage companies telling them what they anticipate that our tax is gonna be?
No, sir, they come to us and get the digest after it's finalized. They don't come, we don't send the mortgage companies anything.
I'm gonna call my mortgage company and inquire, but how would my mortgage company know that, to go up on my bill? Why did my bill go up $125 a month? I mean, I know y'all can't answer that question, I'm gonna ask them, but I anticipate that it's based on the value.
They figure your insurance premium in there too. And
No, my insurance is not doubling, I mean,
well, but they estimate it their way. We don't give them anything.
right, so
They should never touch that.
how when I have someone that's purchasing my stepdaughter's house from Savannah that purchased a house in Savannah from New York. Now they're buying this house. They haven't even been on the property. and they're making $180,000 in 2 years. That's not normal. And how are we gonna go back? What's your plan to go back and get these assessments back in line?
It's about sale, does the sales happen?
So
That's
if
what
houses
we
don't
got to
sell,
do.
our values are gonna stay inflated?
It's a supply and demand in the marketplace. The market's driving the values. And so when there's a low supply of inventory that we've had for several years and there's a high demand, and you indicated one of the things driving that is people moving from other states here. So it's driving that demand, and so prices are going up. So the market will have to correct, and that's where, you know, the Federal Reserve keeps adjusting interest rates up, trying to slow that inflation because it's happening. But the tax commissioner has a very good website that will have like all of your prior year tax bills that you can look at real easily if you haven't kept them, or people out there don't keep up with those or pay them and then throw them away. But, you know, look on that tax bill and look at what's driving those increases, because most likely you're going to see that it's other taxing authorities other than this body, because what this is the county M&O, because when you look, you know, we continue to roll back and lower that county M&O, and we've kept our total taxes flat, even though you're having all these increases in values. So that's being driven, if you're seeing a large jump, that's probably being driven by other taxing authorities, or part of that may also be your homeowner's insurance. I know insurance companies have taken some pretty hard hits with all these storms and tornadoes and floods, and they're also adjusting rates as well.
But that's $1,400.
Let me say something about your escrow. If it was short
Yeah, I know you have
last
to
year,
pay it.
they go up covering that shortage plus your new
That,
amount. and
that would
makes the
have been
big
addressed
away.
earlier in the year, not in August. They would have made the adjustment. I get a notice of that every year, that addresses how much it's short, and you can choose to make a one-time payment to catch it up, or you can spread it out over the
They're
years.
just playing with you right now. They're going up for
Thank you.
everything.
Thank you.
Robbie, thank you, Robbie.
Anybody else on the tax digest topic before we move into our regular meeting? Okay, what we probably, let's see, we'll just go ahead and go over into that next part.